Welcome to the Mognet podcast. I'm Mike.
And I'm James.
This is episode 3. In this episode we speak to Lauren and Darryl of the hugely successful Final Fantasy Union. They discuss what they do on their channel, a bit about their creative process, women in the gaming industry, introducing their kids to Final Fantasy, and we do a 3-way trivia battle. This is Final Fantasy and Chill meets Final Fantasy Union. Welcome, Lauren and Darryl of Final Fantasy Union. So their YouTube channel features some of the most comprehensive Final Fantasy video essays out there. It's been going since 2014. Their podcast since 2009. They'll also branch out into a few different directions we'll get into in a little while. Can you guys please talk to us about a little bit what you do on your YouTube channel?
What don't we do?
Yeah.
So, I mean, our roles have changed quite a lot over the years in terms of what we actually do, but we've kind of like separated out. So I do a lot of the kind of the research and the writing. I also do a lot of the voiceover work, and then Lauren does more of the editing side of things, but also more of like the social side. I'm a bit of a recluse, so I'm not the world's best person on social media. So yeah, we have a nice kind of like separation. But we also, Lauren is like this crazy like idea generation person. So every now and again, she'll just have a brainwave and be like, we should do this. And I'll be like, okay, I'll try and figure out how we can do it.
You're my little Nojima, really, for reference with Final Fantasy, because Kazushika Nojima is the one who kind of like takes everybody's ideas and makes it make sense. And I feel like we do have that dynamic of like, I could be the Nomura or maybe the Toriyama, because some of my ideas are a bit out there, and then you can be the Nojima. But no, I think like for me, so yeah, working on Final Fantasy Union, I was the sole video editor for a very long time, and it was mainly because like I've been video editing since I was like 14. I've always wanted to be on YouTube doing something, and I've tried so many different things over the years. Editorial content, like AMVs from back in the day, like finding things to match Evanescence to or Within Temptation, I've always loved video as a format, and so it was just a matter of time until I found something. And then one day, Darryl was working on redeveloping the website, FinalFantasyUnion.com, with a friend. And I just had this idea of like, why don't we do like origin videos, like some kind of video that sort of follows the life of certain characters, but like in a more cinematic sense instead of just reading. Because I'm terrible at reading. Like I love anything that I can consume with my eyes/ears. So I had like a pilot like years ago for the content that we do now, but it took us sort of seeing somebody else who was doing a similar content for Harry Potter before we just were like, we can make this work for us.
Sometimes it takes a long time for these ideas to actually manifest, and we're talking like years sometimes, where we have an idea and then like to actually realize and create it can take some time, which is quite crazy.
Because it's quite risky, right? Like you don't want to put all your heart and soul into something and then see it just kind of flop, right? Like it's a lot of hard work that goes into it. So, seeing somebody else being able to do what you essentially want to do is so important in order to push you forward and make you believe in what you're creating.
Yeah. Very much so. So me and James first, me and James met each other in like 2008, and like for university, we lived together through loads of those different years, and we'd sit and remix different music and things like that. James is the animator, and we'd work on lots of different projects and do this stuff, and it took us so long to sort of get it to something where we wanted to put out in the world for various different reasons, and we went our separate ways for a little bit, and then eventually started to work on it like about 18 months ago. It took us that long to kind of develop the idea to something where we're like, right, we're ready to actually put something out to the world. So definitely understand that sort of building confidence.
It's finding that point, isn't it, where you're like, right, we've got something tangible here, but then turning that into something actual that you're like happy to put out with is not just like a hurdle of doing the work, but it's also like a mental hurdle as well, because you know you see it so many times because you're editing these things, you're like, you spot things that obviously nobody else will ever spot and stuff.
Yeah.
You need to get over those hurdles, just be like, no, just leave that bit alone, you'll be fine. Like,
the curse and the beauty of being a perfectionist.
yes. Stare at it until you hate it is what I say.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's sort of my role with James. I have to tell him, right, we're done with this. That's going out.
I know.
Lauren, you also have your own separate channel where you do like a video game playthroughs and stuff as well, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of am a bit of a mixed bag because I'm always trying to, I think it's a lot of my own soul searching in terms of like just sort of what it is that defines me, what I liked to do. So basically 2 years after doing Final Fantasy Union full time, essentially, I started getting that itch where I'm just like, oh, I really could do something. I really could do with another project to sort of sink my teeth into. And that's when I decided to start She Plays Games, which is a podcast about women in the video games industry. So I essentially, I thought about my own career and how little guidance I had and how little role models I had and to like sort of emulate when I was growing up. So you know, I was always really into art, and the thing I always got back, the feedback was like, all right, well, either you work for Disney or you grow up as a penniless artist, because that was what all the movies said, right? Like, if you're good at art, you're poor, and that's like your life, and then you die, and then you become famous. Like that's that's like the story that they tell you, which is horrible. Like it's
starving
really
artist.
Horrible. Yeah, like the starving artist is such a toxic / like overdone trope, but you start to believe it in yourself if you can't see it outside of your own point of reference. So I abandoned art in high school. I decided to go into theater instead, and because you know, what's more safer from being an artist, being a starving actress. Yeah, so I was just like, you know, well, what can I do to help other women who are in my situation who, you know, wish that they had more just more people to look up to, more people to see doing what I want to do. And so I created the She Plays Games podcast in order to interview a load of women who are doing a load of different roles within the games industry, and to just try to help inspire other girls and women to find the path that works for them to get into the games industry, rather than like just kind of thinking it's not possible, or thinking that, you know, you are not going to have, like, you're going to have a successful career, but you're going to be extremely unhappy in your like regular life, you know? So, yeah, so I do that. And then also I just play games on stream / on my YouTube channel, just to have fun. I mean, honestly, like, it helps me with my improv, because you know, when I do things like presenting and interviewing as well, it's a lot of like thinking on the fly. So I feel like playing through games is like a safe space. Playing through games and then recording it and producing it gives me a safe space to practice like jokes and making other people laugh, and also just making myself laugh sometimes.
It's really hard. Like,
so hard.
Playing a game and being interesting at the same time is a skill. It's a really hard skill.
I did it for Final Fantasy 1 and 2 and started with 3, and I was kind of just like, nobody's watching these. They're just watching our remixes. And I was just, but it was just really fun, kind of just like sitting there and getting used to it and using yourself as like your own internal clock for, I don't know, in some bits when I listened back to it, I was like, what am I talking about? It's complete nonsense. And then other bits, I was like, oh, that's not too bad. And kind of work on that.
It's also hard with the perfectionism side as well, because I remember when we were first talking about doing streaming on Twitch, my whole thing was like, I wanted to make sure that I was like completely knew exactly what I was doing. I would make no mistakes whatsoever, because I just knew that people would just be judging, but in reality, no one really cares. Like,
Yeah, and it's like, why do I care that the people that are judging aren't going to stay there for very long anyway? So why should you be bothered? But that's the whole fight you have with yourself about it, I guess, isn't it?
I think I really nearly gave Darryl an aneurysm when we were playing through Skyrim, and like he was playing. We had this idea of like, oh, wouldn't it be cute to play couples Skyrim, and I'll play through one episode and you play through the other. Well, he was playing through the one episode and like doing all this like, you know, very trying to follow the right path and all this stuff. I just went pure chaos, and I was just like, who is this guy? It's a big cat person, and then I ended up in a vampire cave, and.
That was playthrough done. Lauren got bitten by a vampire. We were a vampire, and it was like we have no idea what we're doing.
Yeah. So then we just gave up. But poor Darryl's. I think I really ruined your stress.
We didn't play Skyrim again after
that. Still haven't beaten
But I think it's a good representation of what we're all about. There, we try things out. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't work. But we're always just experimenting with random stuff and seeing what we can do.
Awesome.
I think we should go back to Skyrim though.
Never again.
I would watch that.
It's great content.
So the podcast, which I've listened to for quite a few years actually. I had it on my subscriptions, and I know you're on a hiatus for the moment. But can you talk a little bit about the journey of the podcast, how you got it started, and
Wow, it's a very long journey. So I didn't appear on the podcast until episode 3. So
it's so cute. It is the cutest thing ever.
I was ridiculously nervous. So basically, I used to run Final Fantasy websites in general, and I reached out to someone else who I knew who had launched a Final Fantasy 13 website about an affiliation between our two websites. And I saw they were doing a podcast, and I think as part of our conversation, he said, like, do you want to come on as a guest? And I was like, sure, okay. I had no way of recording or doing anything though. So then I had this mad panic, and I went out and spent a ridiculous amount of money on like microphones, amplifiers. I got external sound cards. Also, I could do this one podcast. And yeah, it was like the podcast in the earlier days used to be like 3 hours long. And yeah, I was really nervous because, you know, I'm not a very good public speaker. I don't really like doing it. It's not something I would do out of choice. And there were like hundreds of people that listened to the show. So I was very, very nervous. You can go back and listen to it now. Actually, I think it's still live. But then I didn't go on the show for a little while after that because I was just a guest ultimately. But then I became really good friends with the person who ran the podcast, and then we ended up basically joining forces. So the podcast merged, and then I became a permanent co-host with Kyle, who was the person who ran it. And then Kyle eventually stepped away, and then I kind of inherited it. And then, that kind of became the normal format. Lauren originally came on via Kingdom Hearts Union, which was our sister show, but then became a more permanent fixture on the Final Fantasy podcast. We had numerous kind of like co-hosts that rotated around. We had like Colin and Spencer, who were really cool to have on there, and Jared as well. So it went on a very, very long journey. We started the podcast as a hype. It was started as a hype mechanism for Final Fantasy 13. Like that's how long ago it was. And like people say that they always go back and listen to it from the beginning so they can hear how ridiculous our predictions were about what was going on or what news was happening around that time. And yeah, like how things changed too, because we were putting out content so regularly, we would get to see how opinions changed. Like when we first started doing the podcast, it was super cool to rag on Final Fantasy 12. It was still recent enough that people just despised it. Yeah. So we used to make a lot of jokes about at the expense of that game, because it's kind of what our audience wanted to do. And then there became a point when it became no longer acceptable to do that. So we had to start changing, toning things down a little bit, still being critical of the game, because I feel it deserves criticism in some areres, but not being as cutthroat with that criticism.
Oh no, I used to get a lot of hate on Final Fantasy.
You were like chalk and cheese.
Because I just didn't care.
I
We
really
were, like-
wanted to like it as well. That was my problem. I really,
I
really, when it came out, I
know.
was so excited, and then I played it, and I did like it, but it was like it just wasn't.
It
That
wasn't
little
the same.
special
No.
Final Fantasy spice just wasn't there at the time.
I mean, if
I
you
never
want a
finished
good
it.
indication of it, the only reason why I got Final Fantasy 12 is because the collector's edition was in a bargain bin used in a GameStop.
No.
If
It was
you
actually-
want that,
it was-
like
it was
you
the
know,
first
it was
game,
the tin version.
being in the UK, we'd have obviously since 12. Sorry, 7. 12 was the first game. In the build-up, I wasn't overexcited. I was still running like fan sites, and I was still like active in the community and everything, but nothing about 12 really appealed to me in the build-up. And then like I didn't buy it. I played through it. My friend bought it, so we played through it together. But there was nothing. I didn't then suddenly desire to go out and play it by myself or anything. It was a difficult one, I think.
I think it was just
Especially
a
for
hard
people in the
time.
UK, because
Yeah.
we were. It was so different from the typical Final Fantasy that we would have, because we didn't have tactics either, which was a bit closer to it.
Yeah,
So
with
for- I
Evil
think-
Link.
Exactly. I mean, well, I think you could still get tactics over here, but it was very, very uncommon. But North America's obviously had that, and it's all pretty well over there. So there was a decent chunk of people that had that connection, kind of liked that kind of story. But it was just not what I was used to. I was used to a Final Fantasy game where there's like, huge drama, romance everywhere, like all these kind of things. And I was all the way through where I was thinking like, so when are Varn and Ash gonna like get together? When's this gonna happen?
Yeah.
Like,
Or are they gonna have a hookup?
and there was a moment like where I thought, it's set up perfectly for it. Like they're sharing a moment. I think it was after the Tomb of Wraith War. They like share this thing about how they can both see this vision or something. And I was like, they're gonna connect here, and then they like never speak ever again.
Daryl's just so disappointed. He's just like, when are they gonna kiss?
It's
That's
just-
the thing. The one true pairing of that game is Fran and Balthier.
Mm.
Like they are the one true pairing. But like I think for me it was the upset of it going online, because like I mean, granted, I was like growing up, I wasn't wealthy. Like my family wasn't wealthy. We couldn't afford to get every console. I basically lived with I bought my own PlayStation, and then I got, thankfully, out of the kindness of his heart, my dad bought me a PlayStation 2 for one Christmas, because we were going to play StarCraft Ghost together. Well, that game got canned. But like, when they announced that, oh, by the way, it's going to be a subscription service based online Final Fantasy title, and that's going to be Final Fantasy 11, I was just like, well, that completely gatekeeps me out of it. Like,
Yeah.
I can't afford to have, I can't justify to my dad, who's like struggling to make ends meet, hey, can you subscribe to this game that I can play with people who I don't know, stranger danger, and just because I want to play the next Final Fantasy. So it's like, it's weird how it like kind of took the wind out of my sails, because like I love Final Fantasy X. It is my favorite game of the series, and it left a really bitter taste in my mouth, because it's just like I felt like my demographic was no longer catered for. And then when 12 came out, I was still kind of irritated, I guess, or just kind of out on the outskirts of it. But like, it was a hard times.
To bring it back to your initial. Sorry, I was going to say, just to bring it back to your initial question about the podcast journey, because we kind of went on a massive segue there. But I think, after we had kids, it became like progressively more difficult for us to do it, because we had to find like specific windows when we could record interrupted.
This time,
and
actually, the time that we're doing now, this was
right
our
now,
prime time to record.
And like, if we couldn't do it, like we'd end up.
No, it's fine. Like,
we'd end
I
up
have to do other
doing.
things.
Sometimes we'd record the podcast like Tuesday morning or Monday evening, and then I'd try and get up the next day. We also had because we had like periods of time before when we recorded before it went live, Square had a very strong tendency to announce big news between the recording and the live. So then we were like, okay, so our content's kind of redundant now.
Yeah.
But yeah, it just became more and more hard for us to fight. That's why we couldn't have guests on the show anymore, because like time zones we couldn't match up with, and like with the YouTube doing so well, it was one of those things where like, do we want to keep investing our time into something that's like a genuine struggle for us to do, or do we want to like just focus our efforts elsewhere? So it's a bit of a sad journey, towards the end of it. And it was because like so many people basically said to us over the years that they listen to the show because where they live, they don't have anyone they know who plays Final Fantasy. They don't have anyone they can really talk to about it. And listening to us have like discussions about it was like kind of like them discussing it with someone. And they, because it wouldn't be like, we're not like huge fanboys or anything. Like we had genuine discussions. Like when we had like more hosts on there, we would have disagreements about things. And I think that's why people really enjoy the show, because we weren't just talking about like, you know, this thing's the best ever, like Final Fantasy's the best ever. It was, you know, we would sometimes spend significant periods of time criticizing what Square Enix were doing and the approach they were taking, and sometimes we went a bit too far. But yeah, it just became a bit too tough for us to keep it going.
So that's why you went on a hiatus, essentially, so you can rethink it and just try and get that passion back, sort of thing for it.
The format had just kind of, I think, especially around there, like there was kind of just lulls and news, and we'd kind of like, we wouldn't have the time to properly prepare during the week, so we'd kind of like, you know, half an hour before recording, I'd like try and muddle something, or we're going to talk about today, and then
it's like, did you watch the trailer? No. All right, let's watch it right before the podcast. You know.
So it's always like super last minute, and yeah, like it just, we felt like we were just kind of doing it a disservice in a way, compared to what we could do with it. So yeah, we decided to put on hiatus basically until, yeah, like you said, we kind of got a new wave of inspiration for it, and like we've thought about ways that we could bring it back in a different way. But like it just, the time hasn't been right for us to do so.
You guys are parents. I'm a parent. Have you introduced your kids to Final Fantasy yet?
No.
Kind of?
Like, it's so, well, yeah, like kind of, but no. Like, so essentially, like, we're trying to think of what we want to do in terms of it. So they've watched Darryl play through Chrono Trigger,
which is not Final Fantasy, very clearly,
which is essentially like Final Fantasy adjacent, Final Fantasy perpendicular, parallel, whatever. But like, yeah, so they know what Moogles are. They've seen like clips of Darryl playing through Final Fantasy VII Remake.
We had no choice in that. Like we got Final Fantasy VII Remake. I got it for a review, and I had like 4 or 5 days to finish the game. The lockdown had just started for the pandemic, and I was still working full time too. So I was like trying to play that game in any possible window I had. So as much as I tried, like they would just come in and watch things happening, and mostly they could yeah. So like the bad stuff in that game is obviously they use bad language sometimes, but they couldn't hear anything. But they know who Cloud is. They know who like all the characters are. They know who Moogles are.
And Chocobo.
We have Moogle plushes that they destroy. They generally pull the poms off.
Yeah.
You can see if Laura moves ahead, Winston has his pom missing. It's gone.
He has a wing gone.
They have
their
wings have gone too. They can't fly anymore.
My poor Moogles.
I've got that exact same Mog with the yellow pom.
He survived. Or has he got a wing missing?
I think he might have a wing missing, probably, but like, yeah.
So's ours, just one wing missing. Violet just would grab it and just go.
Yeah.
Yeah, because like
they don't understand. These are special.
I know, but yeah, no, like so. I think we're thinking about how it's like so funny because like parenting, but like we're thinking of how we want to do it because we want to do it with a game that we actually like, that we adore, you know, like the game that we really love, but we don't want to scare them. So it's like, which game is like not scary? I mean, I think Allie would be okay with 9.
Yeah,
I feel like 9 would be a safe one.
The 16-bit ones as well, like 4 and 6 are probably good. Like,
I really want to experience 10 with them, but I just don't think it's the right time yet.
It's
like,
quite bleak
10
in
is my favorite.
parts.
Yeah.
But that's our adult perspective, though, right? Kids are just like, oh, pretty thing, shiny stuff.
Oh my god, like Disney films are the worst. Like they're the but both Allie does not like Disney films. Like she
does like the stressful moments because they always have like a really bad moment where something horrible is happening in those films for whatever reason. I guess for the story cadence and stuff. But
I don't know.
Yeah, she hates it. She hates all those moments. And And like in Chrono Trigger, she got really upset when Chrono kind of went away for a period. She cried, and then she was so happy when he came back.
Yeah, she's still like, her speed currently is still like Kirby and
Kirby.
Mario. Like,
I
those
think
are the safe ones.
That's kind of why I'm a bit not worried, but like a lot of the Final Fantasy games, they're quite different from Chrono Trigger in the sense that Chrono Trigger has like such a diverse cast in comparison. Like their favorite characters are Frog and Robo, and like there's not really equivalents in Final Fantasy games to that kind of character. Like 7's got Red 13, and like 9's got Quina.
6 has a lot.
It does, but they're not like the main focus though, right? Like,
no.
So I think it like they don't really care too much about like Chrono. Like they don't like Luca and Marl aren't like really their favorites. Like they like Ayla, and Robo and Frog. They're like their go-tos because they're just they're different. They like invoke their imagination more. So like when they're like playing around, we used to do this like role play. So I like put on the battle music, and then they like start pretending to have a fight. So we put like probably like with that pillow on there, which like that's your enemy. Like you got to do attacks, and then wait till their turn, and then they'd like do attacks in the way that the characters would do them, and then they'd like, if they're like playing Isla, they can do like because she like pretends to be an animal. And Frog like hops around and does like jumps and stuff, and like they would just have fun with those, whereas the other characters are a bit more like, okay, so like Luca just fires a gun. It's like it's not as exciting.
Yeah.
So yeah, like we have thought about it, but the itch hasn't necessarily been there. And also I feel like in some way I'm a bit protective of it. Like I don't know, it sounds probably a bit weird because I'm like, I guess I'm afraid.
You don't want them to hate it.
What if they don't like it?
I think 9's a good entry point though, because they just like the whole look of it is like a fairy tale essentially, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, I think it's very cutesy, and all the little like hippo characters and stuff, as little side characters, are all really fun. It's quite bleak also though in parts, so but
yeah.
It's nothing on the beginning of Up though, so there you go.
It's like, it's interesting actually, because 9 was the one that so like I haven't been a part of like a Final Fantasy release hype until probably 15. Every other game, so 8 I was first introduced to by my brother. Like it was probably years after the fact. I don't know what year I actually was first introduced to it. I always say I was about like 10 or 11, because like that's like a good guesstimation, but like essentially he was playing through it at his house, and I was just like, that looks really sick. And then I found it used at Sam Goody one day and bought it and played it and loved it. And then like because of that game and because of my love of that game, I went back and played, I got Final Fantasy 7, played through 7. And then I wasn't even aware that 9 was coming out until one of my friends had their birthday. His name is James, and he got it for his birthday. I wasn't even aware that there was a Final Fantasy 9 in existence. And we all crowded around his TV in his like mom's bedroom playing Final Fantasy 9, and just kind of being like whoa, like this is really different in comparison to the other games. Like, why, like he has a tail? Like who's this guy? Like where are all the normal people? But but I later did play it for real, and I loved it. But like but yeah, and then 10 I didn't play until my other brother had it, and I played through the ending because that was the save file he had, and then would play the beginning until I had to go home back to my dad. So yeah,
I want to be a Blitzball when I grow up.
I know. I know. It's just bizarre. Like, and the girls won't really have that. The girls will always have to kind of go through us for Final Fantasy, I think.
They'll have their own things though.
They'll have their own,
yeah. But like their friends will not be like pulling out Final Fantasy.
Yes, it's not relevant at all in the way that it was when we were growing up.
Yeah,
like it just isn't.
I love the Origin series purely just because of how granular you guys get on the lore. Like I really, really like it. That was one of the first one of the first things I just started binging. So, what are you working on at the minute, Origins wise? What have you got on the docket?
Oh, it's a tough one actually. So Origins are, I mean, they've been on hiatus for a little while. But we were thinking about bringing it back for Genesis because of Crisis Core. But I don't know if I'm going to have time to get it sorted before the reunion comes out. But like, yeah, we really enjoy doing the Origins videos, but there also became a point where it's kind of like diminishing returns a bit. Like we have like, because I used to ask people what characters they wanted us to do, and we've got a list of like 200 separate characters that have been requested for us to cover in that series. But then, like, you know, we were doing some characters like Cypher and Adia and like Rufus, Hojo, and like people weren't overly bothered about. Like, it's hard because you get like the people that really enjoy those videos, but they weren't really appealing to like wider people for whatever reason. So it became a bit demoralizing working on them because, you know, you'd put a lot of time and effort into, because they would take a lot of time because, you know, like I'd obviously have my own memory of the stories, but you only like half remember things. And then so I'd have to go back, and then I'd read all the scripts if I could. I'd watch playthroughs. I'd obviously try and dig through the Ultimanias, like trying to basically triangulate all this information to tell a coherent story. But then not just that, it's not like one of the things I was always like very adamant about when we did the Origins, like to your point about when we kind of visioned them in the first place, was that it's not just going to be a retelling of the story. It's not like this character went here and they did this and then that happened. It's very much like a kind of completely one-dimensional or like very focused look at this character and how they feel about things, how wider events impacted them, and like, you know, why they took certain actions, as opposed to like a very kind of arbitrary like Cloud fought Sephiroth. It's like, but why did he fight Sephiroth? You know, like, you know, that's the important thing. Like the battle, like the battle itself is kind of like, in those videos, it's kind of inconsequential. It's more like the build up of like what led to that moment. How do things impact them? I think in that regard, like the one I'm probably the proudest of is Beatrix, because I managed to like, she's not in the game very much, but from all my research, I managed to basically make like a 20-minute video of like coherently telling this like wide like story, the impact she had, and, you know, really surfacing the struggles that she faced, but also like the consequences of her actions, because they kind of get glossed over in the game a bit. Like, you know, she's like going around like committing genocide, and then on the next everyone's like, oh hey General, how's it going, high five.
She definitely is she's a really compelling character. We were talking to the previous podcast we did, we were speaking to the guy on that about Beatrix, which is one of his favorite characters on that. She's really awesome.
Which is really underappreciated, 100%.
Yeah, like that's the thing. Like, I think, you know, recently I did that sort of social media post because I just freaking love Beatrix, and I think like so many people who haven't experienced her yet like need to, because she was like one of the coolest, strongest, like sort of semi-antagonist person that we've had in a Final Fantasy game. Like, I mean, you know, the villain game was so strong in those kind of days. Like, I mean, you know, you went from Adia, who was just iconic, to Beatrix, who was also iconic, and like Kuja. And like Seymour was just incredible as well, to whoever you have in 12 and 13.
In 12 there isn't really an equivalent of those kind of characters. Like, it's you know, Vayne is kind of there, but like he's not really an overarching threat to you as such. And then 13,
Sid Reigns was pretty cool.
They still did all that with 15 though.
Yeah. Like Arden was cool, but like his motivations were a bit, I think
a
bit weird.
Yeah, like the Origins videos for Arden and probably Lightning, maybe Caius, like they were some of the most complicated ones I've had to do, because those stories are all over the place.
Yeah.
Like you've got like books, DLC, like all this stuff, and I'm like, you know, it felt like I was doing some kind of research piece, honestly, just to try and piece it all together, because it's not like I've got to try and get it into in like a timeline order of when these things are actually taking place, which for 15 is not overly clear, and 13 as well. Like and 13, like motivations, like when these things are all happening. Like Caius was hard, very hard.
And we had like an expert who was supposed to be like this Final Fantasy 13, like they were a total like Final Fantasy 13 nut, and we were just like, can you help us?
Like, just sense check this, please. Can you help
sense check this? Yeah, I have no clue what's going on. Just like, really? But Caius, I mean, regardless of the confusion, like Caius was the last like really great villains.
I still feel as if Caius was in the first game, it would have been so much better received.
Yeah.
Like some of his nature, because he's kind of what that game needed. Like someone that you can really kind of, because he's a very close equivalent to the antagonists of past, like Sephiroth, because even though Caius is like positioned as this horrible evil person, like he's very very sympathetic. Like if you like read about his plight, like he basically got made into this thing.
Yeah,
he didn't ask for it. Like he didn't ask to be made immortal and have to watch his like closest friend die repeatedly, and then like he got driven to it. He's not a bad guy, and it's the same with Sephiroth. Like he's not a bad guy at all. It's just that Zack ruined his life. Yeah, ultimately.
Yeah, product of their environment.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Then you've got Seymour, who is truly an awful guy. I don't think he's got any redeeming.
But he does though.
He does, I guess
I know it's just because I have like a lot of passion about Seymour, because like he is a product of his environment, because of the fact that, and it's actually really interesting as well. I don't know if y'all knew about this, but like, so basically, like, you know, the whole story, like he was trapped in Baj Temple with his mom.
Yes.
His mom goes on a pilgrimage and dies, and then
because she's terminally ill.
Yeah, and like, you know, he's driven to this because of freaking Jiskel like abandoning him when he was younger, for the sake of a race that is horribly racist and
cold, and, like, very very
cruel.
Cold.
Yeah, but then humans are just as cruel and horrible to Guado because they don't like Guado. So it's just like, you know, he's a product of prejudice and hate, essentially.
Yeah.
But like, if you go into Baj Temple, apparently there's like writings on the walls of like Seymour that Seymour wrote while he was going like crazy.
We covered it in one of our recent facts videos, and like I think it's Toriyama. Toriyama has this like really strong obsession with going super granular, and there's so many, even like the 7 remake, there's so many details in the game that people have completely missed, and they probably will not find for years. And yeah, one of the, like in Final Fantasy X, when it originally came on the PlayStation, there's writing everywhere. Like there's tons of like Yevon script and stuff all over the place, which has all these hidden meanings which people haven't like transcribed properly. But in Baj Temple, like when the HD remaster came out, you can see, and you have to specifically be looking, but there is like Yevon, or no, it's Spearin script. One of the languages is kind of like scrawled all over the floor, where he's basically obviously gone mad, and he's like just been writing stuff all over the floor, but you couldn't see it until the resolution was good enough.
Yeah.
Which is just crazy.
That's crazy.
There's actually a guy who followed us on our Instagram page a couple of weeks ago, and he's just going through translating every last different bit of script he finds in every wall. I don't think he's been doing it very long, but he's kind of doing it kind of like zone by zone. So
there's so much symbolism, like there's so much symbolism like all over the place. In like the temple, in like the cloister of trials, there's stuff all over the place. That's like the balls, apparently you put the orbs that you put in the pedestals, they have certain Yevon symbols relating to the element they are on them, like but it's like really hard to see.
It's crazy.
Like, so it's like the effort they went into to do all of these things, knowing that no one's probably ever going to take the time to find out what they mean.
It's why it is my favorite, because it's like I love like that. that is like the essence of Japanese culture, right? Like Japanese culture is all about doing things thoroughly and about the importance of the finer details. And I think when a game like Final Fantasy X comes out and it has all of these hidden details in it that make it feel more enriched, that you can keep going back to and keep finding. Like, I still want to do a playthrough where I go all the way back from, I think it's basically from Guado Salam to Besaid to see the different phrases that everybody says because of the certain events that happen.
That was a huge revelation for me. Like because after Operation Mi'ihen, you can find a way back to Luca, and then all the dialogue for all the NPCs is completely changed.
Yeah,
and it like unlocks this whole like political undertone about what was happening and like the different factions that are at play and like all of this like kind of wider stuff that feels like it should be in Final Fantasy 12 because it's so political.
Yeah.
But it just kind of gets swept under the carpet a little bit with 10. But yeah, like there hasn't been another game like 10 where there's just so many layers, and like even now people are still doing analysis, uncovering new things about that game after like 20 years. I can't think of another Final Fantasy game where that's the case.
Yeah.
I think like although it's probably not my favorite, 9's my favorite, but 10 is the one that I probably revisit the most because it's the most accessible, I feel like, and I always go back to it. I always have the same like laughs and can see it, all the different characters and stuff. But yeah, I'm probably subconsciously unraveling more stuff every time you play it because that's probably what's making me go back to it because I didn't know about the Badge Temple thing.
I mean, doing the Origins videos for those, like Tidus and Yuna were the longest ones we've ever done. I think Yuna was like 50 minutes long or something ridiculous. And yeah, like I think because like we kind of got a bit fed up, honestly, that Tidus gets such a bad rap. You know, the wider perception is that he's this whiny kid and everything, and it's like, you know, if you kind of put yourself in his shoes, you'd probably be a whiny kid too. Like, you know, and like, you know, he has so many struggles. And with Yuna as well, like we really wanted to use the video to highlight to everyone that, because again, like people just think she's a pushover and like it's really weak character, and it's actually no, she's probably one of the strongest protagonists we've ever had in terms of what she has to put up with, the burdens that she has to shoulder, and like the decisions she chooses to make. She's like an incredibly strong-willed person. She's just not physically strong. She's mentally strong.
But that's like kind of the annoying thing about like character generation in general. Like, just like that everybody thinks that in order for them to like a game, they have to, every single character, they have to like on paper love. Like, you know, like I have to unconditionally love every single character. And they don't have any flaws. They're just who they are. And it's like, no, you have to have flaws. Like people always come at Waka and it's just like, no, but like that helps to generate a really important conversation about race and how we view people and that kind of thing. Like, you know, you can't have a game with unflawed characters. That would be the most boring game in the entire world. It's
kind of like the problem that 15 had for a long time until like the defining scene in that game for me is when they have the argument between Ignis and Gladio about Gladio basically saying like, we're going to leave you behind because we can't carry you anymore, you're useless to us. And obviously it was a whole commentary on disability, and you know that they got so emotional about that scene during that scene, and like, you know, it was the only scene in that game that really affected me in that way. I was getting angry, like I was getting angry at Gladio for the way he was behaving, and like it didn't happen, like at no other point in the game was I like really that invested in what was going on. It's just like things are just kind of happening, and like, you know Noctis is getting angry, but he's just basically being a spoiled child. I don't really care. It was only when that kind of stuff started to happen, and you see like Gladio basically just being a not nice person, that like because it was a flaw of his. Like it was a clear flaw, and like none of the other characters really, like Prompto didn't really have any flaws in the same regard, like in the game at least.
His flaw was that he just unconditionally loved Noctis.
And the big reveal is that he's like part of the enemy, and it's like, you know, it's not really like, oh well, like, you know, by that point you just got so conditioned to, like there was never any chance they were going to kick him to the curb.
Yeah, like the risks, the risks weren't there. The what's the word? The the struggle, the risks, the it's gone. It's like one of those words where it's like, the stakes. The stakes weren't high enough for the characters, like it was never, you never felt like you were in danger.
Yeah.
In the right way.
Yeah, I only played 15 when it first came out, and I hadn't played any of the extended stuff you needed to understand the narrative going into it. So I went into it, I was like, I have no idea what's going on in this game. And played it, enjoyed walking around, thought it was pretty, but kind of felt like it felt like half a game compared to previous titles, despite the fact it's some expansive game that took me 20 hours to complete. Like, it still felt like half a game compared to previous installments. And Darryl, I think you're right about the juxtaposition in that one scene. Is probably the only scene that I remember from it, bar like some of the more grand moments of it, like Leviathan and stuff like that. Like, really, I don't remember much else about the plot.
Square Enix as a company has really struggled to keep up with things, and like I think if they had the more time to do some proper world building, I think it would have been a much better game. Like Dino having like, just a storyline at all. Like he's running from something, so you have to catch up with him in Lestalem. And
I still think it's great that they just randomly had like an Italian mob boss.
Yeah.
in like,
but
in
no
like
Italian mob.
Yeah.
Like where was the rest of the mob? Like what is he doing?
Do you reckon they remember that Don Corneo was a character? Like, oh yeah, we like Don Corneo. Let's get a guy like that in here.
Yeah, but make him like anime bishy, like anime gorgeous instead of the lovely Don Corneo.
So, Lauren, your favorite game is Final Fantasy X. Darryl, what's yours?
I'm leaning towards 10 as well now. It used to be 7 for a long time.
Him.
But yeah, I think after running the channel, it's really converted me over. Because to your point, James, like just going back constantly, like revisiting the game. I think doing the Origins videos really kind of like converted me over a bit more. Because like when I was doing the Final Fantasy VII Origins videos, the stories aren't actually that comprehensive. Like not too much really happens, and like especially with the side characters, like they're always like each of them have like a side mission that they undertake that's part of the story where you get a small focus on them. Like Red 13 has his thing with Bugenhagen, but like after that point they're involved, they basically don't exist in the story. They do nothing. So like, doing those, and even Cloud was kind of similar. It's, I ended up glossing over huge parts of the game because they don't actually do anything. And like 13 and actually was kind of similar. Like I think after Lightning joins up with the rest of the group, she just becomes part of the group. She's obviously she's supposed to be billed as the main protagonist, but a lot of the lines of dialogue she has is just her reacting to something else that's happening as opposed to taking any kind of leadership role. Like, it's actually quite often Snow who's kind of, or Fang that are kind of taking the initiative and doing things, and they're just be like, Lightning, what do you think? And she'd be like, yeah, cool, sounds good. It's not like there's no character development there.
Yeah, I struggled with Lightning. I struggled with 13 in general. It's one that's I'm going to go back to it and play it at some point, probably on Twitch, so I have people there to help me through it. But
the gameplay is awesome. The gameplay is my favorite.
Okay.
I think it was like they were going through a transition where they were trying to tell more realistic stories. So, and you can kind of see it, like we used to talk about on the podcast a lot, that each of the characters goes through like an emotional development phase. So like halfway through their stories, they have like a complete personality shift. And like
paradigm shift.
So like Hope goes from this like angsty kid who like hates Snow, and then all of a sudden like they kind of have like this heart-to-heart moment, and then they're besties all of a sudden, and like it's all forgotten.
Yeah.
We'll ignore the fact that I've just been like wanting to kill you for the last like however many hours of gameplay. We're cool, man. We're cool.
Yeah, hope matures.
Suddenly becomes this, and
puberty.
then like
it's just a hell of a thing.
and like they kind of each go through it, and like and it was part of obviously the story in that regard, because like once they had to kind of get brought to an emotional brink so that the Eidolons could come and challenge them, and then if they made it through that challenge, then they obviously kind of like became more whole as individuals. But yeah, it was like, I think they struggled a lot with the way they tried to do it, and like they also tried to give every character the spotlight. So like, you know, in the previous games there were clear defined like a number one character, this is the big dog, and maybe there was occasionally like a secondary character who was like alongside them. So, you know, obviously in like 7 it's pretty much just Cloud, and you've got like Tifa and Aerith who are kind of like there as secondary characters. In 8 it's very much Squall, like it's basically Squall's game, and Renault is kind of there, and then the rest of the characters, like they're just there, they don't really contribute too much to things. 9 you've got Zidane and Garnet, and then you've got like the ensemble cast, and then 10 you've got Titus and Yuna, who are kind of like, you know, Titus is technically the like billed as the main, but Yuna could easily be the main character too. 12 is kind of ambiguous, no one knows who the main protagonist is there, but they didn't really spend too much time on development. It was more of like an overarching story that they were part of. But 13 they tried to make each character the main character, and like it just, because they tried to give every single character like their moment in the spotlight, and it ended up just becoming a bit diluted across the board,
disjointed,
and like it like they didn't really have a focal point for it. You didn't really know who you were supposed to be like rooting for or like anything like that, because they kept positioning Lightning as that person, even to the point where in the sequel she's on the box art, and it's like you play as her for like 5 minutes.
Just kidding.
Like,
I think 6 is sort of guilty of that in a way as well. I love 6. It just feels, it's a totally different sort of mood to it than any other FF game. But like,
I mean, it's interesting with 6 in that regard. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, please go.
Just because like everyone lauds 6 for its storytelling, but Katase himself actually in his notes that he pulled together afterwards was like, I never want to write a story like that again, because it was too hard. There were too many protagonists. You can't follow that many threads. Like they shrunk it all down and they made it super concentrated.
Like, is it Celeste? Is it Terra? Like,
could be Locke as well. Could be Edgar.
Yeah.
I mean, there are really fantastic characters in there, but
then you end up with Gao and Umaru and like Gogo and like all these other characters who were just kind of they tried to do things with them, but like it just, I think they just it like some people really love the fact that there's a huge world of characters, because like you have so much diversity in terms of you can play as whoever you want. A lot of people, like, you know, if you ask people their party setup, there's going to be some similarities, but again, that's also going to be people that genuinely love using Gao. And like,
but there's freaking sections where you have to use all the characters that you've never used in your party, because it's the ending boss and you have to use every single character that you have. Oh, it's horrible.
But at least we got some amazing character themes out of it. I love the music in 6. Like, Gao's music is amazing. It's one of my favorite pieces of like individual character themes.
No, I love Celeste. I think that like she's just awesome. She's so cool. She has a bit of that like Beatrix vibe, but more on the side of good, even though her past is really bad. But no, like it's that thing where they could have used they could have cut out some of the characters in order to help develop the threads that they did have in there. That would have been a lot cooler to check out. Like, I mean, honestly, like just having it from, I mean, even just Shadow's perspective, like the whole game just from like Shadow's perspective would be really interesting.
Yeah, it's good. It disappears for half the game.
Yeah.
And then may never come back, depending on what you do.
Yeah, that's a good point. I was looking at the Kickstarter you did for the Legacy of the Crystal book. Can you talk about that a bit?
So yeah, I mean, like we talk about ideas taking a long time to manifest. That idea was like 6 years in the making. A long time ago. Huh?
You wrote a book, like.
The book, like, weirdly enough, the writing the book itself actually didn't take too long. In terms of like, in comparison to like molding the idea into something that was feasible. And like when we originally came up with the idea, it wasn't even a book. It was just we were trying to do another website relaunch. Always website relaunches.
Yeah.
And we were thinking about what we could do, like a really cool thing we could create that showcased like the I guess like the genealogy of the franchise. Because like I was like, we both got these kind of like weird feelings that and things we want to prove to people. And one of the things I was trying to look up was how many games they typically announce a year, and how long they typically take between announcement and release. So I started looking up games in the Square Enix era to try and like plot this out. So I'd try and find like when it was announced, how long it took before they released the game. And then it gradually started like snowballing a bit. So I was like breaking them down. I started including like remasters and all these different things. And then I started finding out about all these games that I didn't even know existed. And I was like, I'm feeling knowledgeable about the franchise. How did I not know about these games? Like, and then I was thinking, well, if I don't know, then there's a decent chance that other people may not know as well. So we tried to make this huge infographic, but we just couldn't figure out how to do it at all. Like, it was going to be this massive mega thing of like so you'd have like a box art, and then we'd like have a line going down to like to show us how long it had gone or whatever. But they ended up becoming too many games, too many lines, like too many classifications that you could potentially do. Because like I think they announced like,
oh my God,
Crystal Chronicles, there's like 5 games that came out in the space of like a year or something ridiculous. And they're all over the place. So you got like games on the DS, games on the Wii, like browser games that were on like Facebook and stuff. We just had no idea how to visually represent it.
Yeah, the infographic was just getting so cluttered and gross. I mean, honestly, it was horrible.
It was pretty bad. But also like the volume of games I had found was also like not small. Because they always talk about how Final Fantasy has like 100 games in it or something, and I was like, there's a lot more than that. There are a lot more than 100 Final Fantasy games.
Yeah.
but it's not the narrative that's
mini
Square
games and everything like that as well. Then it's
exactly
it's insane.
There's so many, and like when you include like remakes, re-releases, remasters, ports, like all these different things, it's huge, the volume of stuff that they've made. And then so we shelved it for a long time, and then like we'd also had this itch to write a book, and we were trying to figure out what to do, like what to write, and we had initially thought about translating some of the videos that we had done into book format. So the evolutions videos we do are really popular, and we thought, wouldn't it be really cool if we did a book that was kind of evolution themed? You could spend a lot more time, because like the evolution videos they're comprehensive, but that we could go more comprehensive. It's just that it's kind of like the diminishing returns. Like, is there any point in going more comprehensive?
I think there's granular and there's overkill. I think you toe a pretty good line with how much depth you go into it.
Exactly. I mean, like, so a typical like job evolution video is probably around 6,000 to 7,000 words. And we were thinking like, well, we probably could push that up to like 10,000-ish if we did more on like the etymology of it, where it came from, because we often wouldn't cover that kind of thing. We wouldn't go too much into the history of the job pre-Final Fantasy to talk about inspirations, and we could delve more into like the smaller games it's appeared into, which is kind of like the format we actually do now more. So we went to numerous publishers with that kind of concept, and most of them ignored us. We had one that we were kind of in a dialogue with, and they basically came back to us and said, yeah, great, you can just because your video gets 100,000 views doesn't mean anyone's going to buy a book. And it was kind of like, we got super demoralized about it. We're just going to completely shelve the idea, and just not do it. And then I was just looking, like, we were quite scared about doing crowdfunding because of the risk associated to it. Like, obviously the commitment on the other end to then deliver on it is, it can be quite intimidating. And like, ultimately we were going to have to do the whole thing ourselves. Whereas if we worked with a publisher, I would just have to write the book and then everything else would be taken care of. So we had like a good 6 months of back and forth between us. Like, do we want to do this? Do we not want to do this? What's the pros? What's the cons?
God.
Like all this stuff. And
it was utter chaos in our house. It's like, I'm like trying to like get the kids ready for school, and Darryl's like, let's talk about the Kickstarter, and I'm just kind of like, okay, I'll jump into my brain again and try and think about this. But it's like,
I'm thinking about sandwiches right now.
Yeah, it was that thing of like, I think I literally just got to a point where I was just like, Darryl, you just got to do it. Darryl, just do it.
And then I was looking around just different crowdfunding campaigns to see kind of if there was anything similar to what we could do. And then I saw another book that was not similar to the concept that we pitched to publishers, but similar to the concept that we had tried to do like 3 or 4 years earlier for the infographic. And I was thinking that could actually work quite well for this. And so then, I came up with the idea of basically doing like a chronological timeline release of Final Fantasy games, really like, and this was like something that when we announced the campaign, some people got a bit confused about, because they were like, how can you only have like, I think it's like I can't remember how many pages it is, like 250 pages or something, but still have games like Final Fantasy 7 and 8. There's entire books out there that have got that many pages talking about those games. And I'm like, but that's not the point. That's not the point of the book. The point of the book is not to re-educate people about Final Fantasy 7. It's to re-educate people about Dive to Hunt, The Adventures of Sorbet, a random Final Fantasy 12 spin-off game that was made for MySpace. Like, like it's like those kind of things that I think people will find interesting, and also the fact that Dive to Hunt wasn't even an original game. It was actually a reskin of a game Square Enix released the previous year called Dive to Hunt. like it's just these kind of things about like why they made certain games, and like there's so many games in Japan that were released that no one knows about. And like there's a lot more I found in my research that were too tenuous to include in there, that are like, they use the Final Fantasy font. They're about summons and stuff, and it's like, but they don't actually specifically mention Final Fantasy. They don't have like Moogles in. So yeah, it was interesting. But yeah, like the prep work, obviously writing the book took a while. Doing the research took a long time as well. Like, I don't know how many Japanese publications I looked through to try to find different sources, information, like find out about these things. Like, there were just random mobile games that were pre-installed on devices in like the early 2000s that you can barely even find. There's like basically no real record that they existed outside of like a press release at the time. There's like no real imagery. Like, trying to find imagery for these games, trying to find what was actually in the games was like, it took a long time.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And then like I'd like get to where I thought like, okay, I'm at the end here, and then even like during the Kickstarter campaign itself, I was still kind of like doing research. I was finding more games to include, so I even updated the campaign to be like, okay, now there's 2 more games that are gonna be in here now.
Oh my
like,
gosh!
There was a Brave Exvius spin-off game that was on Facebook, called Brave Exvius Tap, and like just all these like weird oddities. In years to come, people are going to forget that there was a Chocobo GP Dash random mobile spin-off game that was like, again, like a reskin of basically Brave Exvius Tap, the Facebook game.
Kind of hoping for like a Gran Turismo like Chocobo game.
Yeah, like it's super weird. But yeah, the campaign itself was like, it was crazy. Like, we didn't really know what to expect, because like people follow our content because of the content, they don't necessarily follow it because of us so much. And we weren't too sure how people were going to react to it, because it was completely different from anything we'd done before. Obviously, like, it's asking people to basically, crowdfunding has a reputation about campaign's not being delivered. Like there was no reason for anyone to trust us in that regard. And so we had no idea. Like I think we expected maybe like 100 to 200 people to buy the book. And if that had happened, we would have been like, okay, we've done it, fine. We never have to do this again. We've ticked. It's kind of like the itch has been scratched. We can just,
we'd be done shipping them by now.
we did it. It's okay. But then we smashed the goal in like under an hour, and then it just kept going. And then
that's amazing.
We made the decision that we were going to fulfill it ourselves. And so like it got to about like halfway, maybe 2/3 of the way through the campaign. Like we had like a full promotional roadmap planned out. We had to stop. We basically just stopped. We downed tools. We didn't want to talk about it. We didn't want to do anything.
It's not happening.
It just became like so overwhelming, like everything that was going on, and we'd like in that first like week in the build up before, we'd spent so much energy that we just basically just crashed, and we were like, we're done. We're done.
With 2 kids, I don't blame you at all.
But it's like obviously like when you think about it, it's such a bad thing to do because obviously you need to capitalize it as much as you can. But it just kind of got to the point where we were like, by the end of the campaign and with like the kind of the post campaign that we put live, it's over 2,000 books, and it doesn't sound like a lot. Well, maybe it does, it doesn't feel like a lot. But like, it was over a ton of books that got delivered to our house, and like,
our house is covered.
It took me with the delivery guy. It took me almost an hour to empty all of the books out of the van into our garage where they've been stored for a long time. And like just fulfilling the book itself it takes so long. Like I'm hand signing all of them, writing all the addresses, like packing all the stuff in there.
We got like our
prints everywhere. Our house is basically just book
badges
everywhere. There's just random parts, things like books ready to shipping, books that are packed, books that haven't been packed yet. Like everywhere you go in our house, except the kids' rooms. No, the kids have like started taking the boxes.
Yeah,
they're making forts out of them. So
them.
That's awesome,
every single part of our house is taken over by this book in some shape or form.
I'm sorry for bringing it back up. I had to do it. So
we just want to like. I mean, it was so amazing. Like the support we got was insane, and I think we're at the point where we kind of want it to be done. Say it can be like in everyone's hands, like, because it's we've fulfilled I think just over half of the books now.
It's good.
But there's in the UK we've got like postal strikes. Like we went to the post office this week, and the post office was shut because it got flooded. Like there are so many things that are preventing us from actually shipping it out, and we just want it to get out to people. Yeah. So that we can be done with it, and like when we can start thinking about what's next. Like, are we going to do another book? Are there any more projects we want to do with the channel? Like, it just to kind of free up some space because like packing books, shipping books out takes a lot.
So basically, I have this question I ask every Final Fantasy fan. It's not even that unusual, really. But you can pick 3 characters for your team, but it's got to be you can only have 1 from each game, from any given game. Who are you taking with you? That could be for an aesthetic purpose, it could be for a strategy that you're involved, or just whatever, like just your personal preference. I don't like to put a box on it, but you both are free to choose. So whoever comes, whoever thinks
I'll let you go first with your who's your primary.
Oh, I mean, my primary is always going to be Titus because I just love him. I'm sorry. I am a total Titus fan, like through and through. But yeah, I mean, I do kind of have it. So I would say Titus, Squall, and Vivi.
Quick off the bat as well.
Yeah, you knew.
So why Squall and why Vivi?
So Squall is also like one. I think him and Titus are like neck and neck. He was my first main character. I think he's such a strong leader, and I don't think he gets enough credit for how well he's written. In terms of like, this is a teenager who has basically been thrust upon him to be a leader, and like he's having an internal breakdown about it because of the fact that the pressure of being a leader is so strong. And, you know, he's not been thoroughly prepared for this, but he still does it anyway. Like, he's such a strong protagonist, and I just adore him. And also his sass is incredible. And then Vivi is so pure. Like, Vivi is one of the sweetest characters, the most innocent characters in Final Fantasy, and very strong with his magic, and also just really iconic. I mean, like, when you think of Final Fantasy, a lot of the times you think of like a black mage, and Vivi is the embodiment of the black mage, and I just adore him.
Good. Give you a bit of extra time to think about this now, and I'm horrible at these kind of questions, but
oh no,
it seems to go one way over the other.
I know you noticed. Okay, so yeah, I've already go Tidus first, for the same reasons. I think I think he's a really great character. I feel like Cloud's my go-to number 2, just because he's just a beast.
It's Omni slash. Repeat.
He also, I mean, it was the first game I played, and then like for my third one, this is the hard one, right? Because I could go with Squall, but then it would just be really basic. And I was thinking about Yuffie stroke Yuffie, because I really liked using her in 7, which makes me quite odd. But I'm gonna go with King from Type 0.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
And the only reason is because like when I was playing Type 0, I think that one of the things I really love about Type 0 is that every single character in that cast is completely different playstyle wise, and like one of my gripes about a lot of the games is that they never really force you in a position where you need to use the characters and get to grips with them and like really kind of build a bond with them, whereas Type 0 did that in a way I've not really experienced before. Like, I think you go into that game, if you guys play Type 0.
I've played a little bit of it.
Never played Type 0. It was one that I kept seeing on the shelf in CX. I was like, oh, I should get that, and then just never did.
So it's one of those games where, like, yeah, each of the characters has got complete, and it's not like they're similar, completely different play styles. And so you'll go into it thinking like, oh, you know, everyone always has a preference based on whatever, like the weapons they use or the character design, thinking I'm going to really like get used to this character. And so they'll start like practicing with that one. Fine. I think most people kind of lean towards Ace to start off with, because he's the character you start off playing as, and he's obviously like the
Ranged,
poster boy.
You're safe.
But then with the way it works, like when a character in your party gets KO'd, the next character comes in, like from the roster, to fill that position. And like generally what will happen is like you're going through missions, and like you obviously get thrust into using these characters you are not familiar with, that are kind of underleveled, but you're also in a position where you don't want to lose. You do not want to lose, because then you've got to start the mission all the way over again. So like the game like really forced you to get familiar with these other characters, and like as you went down the pecking order, you'd kind of unearth these characters that you just didn't really think. Like I remember Jack, like he's a samurai. He walked really, really slow, and I was like, "Oh my god, this is so frustrating!" Like, how can you do anything with this character? And then I kind of like, it's kind of like in the 7 remake when you play on hard mode, and like you figure out how Tifa works, and it's just like this kind of like epiphany of like, "Oh my god, this is amazing! She's the best character ever."
Yeah.
But like until you're forced to play with her and like figure that out, like I did not like Aerith when I played through 7 remake on the normal mode, because like I think she's the character you don't ever actually have to play as in isolation throughout the whole playthrough. You get a sequence as Barrett and a sequence of Tifa, but to my point, like everyone plays as Cloud all the time, because like it's who you start off with, and it's like you get used to it, you get comfortable with Cloud. So why would you purposely, unless you've got like a real like soft spot for the other characters, why would you purposely go and make the game harder for yourself by having to relearn how to play the game? But like Type 0 was like really good at the way it did it. And like King was this ranged character with double pistols, so it's basically a gunner job, and there was a weapon he had called the death penalty, which is obviously an ode back to Vincent, but it had instant kill on it. So, and he had a move where he would like do like an evasive roll out of the way, and like he'd like get a slight slow motion where he'd fire a ton of shots. So there's always a chance you could instant kill an enemy in like that barrage. And I just loved it. It just went every single mission, you just diving around everywhere, kind of like playing Max Payne.
Yeah.
In a Final Fantasy game. And just like instant killing all these enemies.
It's like
like,
that you've always wanted.
It was great. And like
Cool.
But yeah, like Type 0 is great because I think to that point about 6 we made earlier where everyone has a different cast they play as. Type 0, I've never met anyone who plays with the same 3 characters as their go-to 3, because like
freaking love Deuce.
they're all so different.
Like for me, Deuce is incredible because Deuce does
She's a troll.
status effects. And she plays the flute, so she's
a bard.
Oh. And she just walks around playing her little flute. But meanwhile, everybody's like dying and like just in pain because of her, and she's just incredible.
She just sends like magical notes across the screen, so you can see afar from these enemies, just like crumbling down in pain.
Iconic.
Cool.
Yeah. No, that like it's true though. Like that game is really, really underrated, and like I think a lot of people should give it another chance just because of how well it's written as well.
Yeah.
Like it's really well written. The characters are awesome.
If you watch the cuts,
amazing.
if you watch Lauren did not play the game, but she watched the ending cutscene and was just a wreck.
I was actually just like looking at pictures because I was trying to remember Deuce's name. I was like, is that her name? Yeah, it's Deuce. And I was just like already getting verklempt because like the ending, it's a really devastating.
I think the thing that really held it back, and I'm really glad that they've not taken this approach with Crisis Core Reunion, was that it's a PSP game that was ported to the PS4 and Xbox One, and it's like I think there's this huge disconnect of people going into it expecting it to be like a PS4 game or an Xbox One game, and it's like it's not. It's a PSP game. They've like done the best that they can. But like there's only so many ways you can polish this, and like you know the same like core tenets of the game are still there. And I do have like some concerns about Crisis Core Reunion in that regard, because Crisis Core Reunion was a PSP game. It was designed to be a PSP game. Like it was designed to be played in short bursts when you were on the train, and like all these different things the same way that Type 0 was. And like the story's kind of disjointed because of that a little bit, like and all those things they're keeping the exact same. I'm just hoping that all the other elements that they enhance like bridge the gap, and because there's going to be a ton of new people checking it out now. Just like Type 0 was the same, because everyone bought that game because it had the 15 demo in it. And yeah, I think a lot of people just got really turned off about the fact that it didn't play how they expected a modern current generation game to play. But then if you go in with it without the expectations and you're thinking, this is a PSP game, I'm playing it on the big screen, it's okay. It's okay if the graphics aren't that great. It's okay if the camera flies around everywhere and gives you inertia. Like it's all right.
As long as expectations are tempered, sort of thing. You know
exactly.
You know what's coming. So trivia. This is pretty new, so we're still working out the kinks, so bear with me. So far it's been James versus the guest, but today, as we've got 2 of you, we're going to do 1v1v1. So it's 5 questions each. Whoever has the most amount of points after 5 wins. If it's a deadlock, there's a tiebreaker, which is sort of just like shout out the answer. So I'm going to do it. I'm just going to do 5 questions for each. So Darryl, I'm going to ask you your 5 first, because you threw Lauren under the bus with the squad. So right, so question 1. In what year was Final Fantasy 1 released on the NES?
1987.
Correct. Well done.
Although technically that's not right. If I'm being the other way, because it was a Famicom in 1987. In the NES was like 1990 in America. Different console, technically.
Okay, fair enough.
Sorry.
Okay, so that's so that question 1 is wrong then.
I'm setting myself up for a fall here, aren't I?
I should have given you more difficult. I should have given you more difficult questions. So for the previous
when we guest on shows, we can't correct the host.
No, you can. Please do. So the previous person we interviewed is a guy called Suna, who heads up like Suna mods. They do like the Final Fantasy 7 thing. So we spoke to him last time, and I made the questions way too hard so I made him a bit softer on this one, just because James was like tearing his hair out as well. So I was like, right, I'll make it kind of a mix between it this time. And after question 1, you're making me regret that.
No.
It's a hard balance. It's a really hard balance.
I'd say that the good thing is that I can add flavor to the questions, right? It's not just an answer. There's additional story, and that's what I'm all about, right? It's digging a bit deeper.
You can tell yourself that at least. So question 2: what is the Moogle's favorite food?
Oh, see, now I told you. You're gonna. I actually don't know.
I'm pretty sure. Is it a Koopa nut?
Yeah, it is. It is a
It's the Outlander guy, yeah.
There we go.
But then when you hear it, you're like, oh yeah.
Yeah. No, I was just like, it's really simple, but I think it's a Koopa nut. Yeah. Yay!
Okay.
All right, you got it,
I've definitely made the rest of them too easy. Damn it. So, question 3: what's the name of the card game in Final Fantasy 9?
Tetramaster.
Correct. Question 4: what is the setting for Final Fantasy 12? And we've just spoken about 12 for the whole podcast, so I'm like,
Ivalice.
Correct. And which is I didn't know this until I was doing this one. What is the only Final Fantasy game without the flan enemy?
Oh wow!
Without the flan.
That's an intense one.
I reckon it's an early one.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
I'm probably gonna say like 3.
It's Final Fantasy 7.
I was actually going to say 7. Oh, I should have said it quicker.
Wouldn't have been your point anyway.
It's not your question,
it's Darryl, so it's fun. Yeah, it's Final Fantasy 7. And then the closest one to it is that I can never say the name of it. You know, the thing that's also in 9, where it's like the big red blob with loads and loads of eyes on it.
Oh, the Hecties.
Hecties, that's it. My brain always just goes off that direction when I try to think of the name.
But yeah, no, I was like thinking, like, which one have I not seen?
I'm really good at trivia when I don't have to answer the question.
I feel you. If I was actually on a quiz show, like pointless.
I'm the worst when I'm put under the spot.
But you did really well though.
This is the ironic thing about me, because like we used to do quizzes at our events, and like I love coming up with questions myself, and like I because I know like so many random things, but then when I'm actually asked a question, like deer in headlights.
Understood. Right, so you got
guess myself.
You got 3 out of 5 though, so that's pretty good going.
60%.
Right, Lauren. Question 1.
Yes.
What colour is the flower that Aerith offers Cloud?
Oh, isn't it yellow?
Yes, it is.
Yes.
Question 2. What is the name of the plague that infects Eos in FF15?
Oh, the Scourge.
Yeah, it is. It's a Star Scourge. I'll give you a Scourge.
Star
Scourge.
I'll give you a Star Scourge, but that's pretty difficult.
Thank you.
Question 3. So this one's a bit out there. So what is Cloud's job in Advent Children? Final Fantasy VII Advent Children?
Oh, he's a delivery boy.
Here he is. He becomes Fry from Futurama.
Yeah. Bless him.
So I don't know what to do with myself anymore. So Final Fantasy VI was originally released in the West under what title?
Oh, Final Fantasy 3.
Correct. You're smashing this.
Yeah, somehow. I don't know how. Like, I was like really, really, really scared.
Why are you doing me last, man?
Because I like to make you suffer.
I'm shocking myself.
Yeah.
So question 5. What is the most powerful spell in Final Fantasy 1?
In Final Fantasy 1. Oh, wouldn't it be like holy? Oh.
Nope.
Ultima, I believe.
Nope.
Doomsday?
Flare.
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 Yeah, I don't think you get Ultima in number 1. You get it in number 2. It's kind of a bit more of a plot point in that. But
yeah. Cool.
Flare is the strongest one you can use. So James.
Oh, cool.
Yes.
Question 4. What instrument do you play to get Tifa's level 4 limit break in Final Fantasy VII?
Piano.
Yeah. I haven't. So normally I try and throw a bunch of really obscure Final Fantasy IX lore at James because it's his favourite game, but I've not been that harsh on this. So, which reoccurring character was described by producer Hironobu Sakaguchi as the Yoda of the series?
Sorry, in the whole thing.
The
In the whole thing.
series. Yeah.
Okay, cool. I guess Sid. I guess because he's in
Correct.
everyone.
I can see.
Most of them.
I can see Darryl nodding.
See, I was gonna say Guggenhagen.
Yeah, that's what I was
it's
thinking. Because I
recurring.
thought it was
I was
just
thinking,
7
like-
exclusive, so I was like,
Yeah.
well, Guggenheim's kind of Yoda.
I'm-
but-
Yeah, you thought the right way.
Right, for question 3, I'm sorry for this one in advance, but so what actor did Tetsuya Nomura base Squall off? And I'll give you a hint for this. It was part of that sort of like 80s band of kind of like child actors who then grew up and we still saw him acting and stuff like this. If you think about this, you can get it.
80s child actors.
Yeah, and they grew
Yeah.
up. We saw him as teenagers. We saw him as adults.
What did they call it? It's not this one, but I can't think. Corey, I'm just thinking of Corey Feldman, but I know it's not that, so that's not my answer.
Okay,
Close
you're
though,
the right
close
sort of
though.
answer. Right sort of ballpark.
Oh, Rivers Phoenix.
Correct. Yep.
No way. I didn't even.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, if you look at like a lot of images, it's like
Yeah,
really,
yeah,
like,
I can-
crystal clear.
Yeah, I
No
didn't
way.
I didn't know until I was
It's the best looking guy at a party.
Yeah.
and then because I felt bad for that one. Question even though you got it right. Question 4. What's Odin's sword named?
Yeah, no, I have no idea.
Oh.
And Saturn Super.
Santetsuken.
Sunset.
I was
sorry,
gonna-
you said no idea. You said
That's
no
okay.
idea. Then
Yeah,
went, mm.
Fair enough. I weren't gonna get it.
Sorry, I should have given you some more time there.
What was it?
Zatanzuken.
Santetsuken.
Yeah, I can't say it
Zatanzuken.
properly. My pronunciation's terrible for most things. Like,
Living
Says
in
mine. It's the
Yorkshire
biggest
all that
complaint I
time.
always get. I never say things correctly.
I know. We're always gonna get read to filth for Titus, but I just like saying Titus.
you can say both as well. I think they've said it can be
Yeah,
both.
I know, but fans don't listen.
Yeah.
It's because everyone watched the well, there isn't anybody that's bothered because they all watched the extended DVD that came with Final
Yeah.
Fantasy X, and the voice actor starts calling Tidus by Tidus, and you're like, what? After you've just finished this. I
Yeah.
spent 70 hours with that guy, and his name was not Tidus.
I think that's why afterwards they just were like, right, you can't name the main character what you want. They're being
Yeah.
called this. You can deal with it. It was really awkward writing the lines around that.
But it's like trying to guess in the lead up as to what the name is going to pronounce like, because Arania, like it's Arania sounds way better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Iris. Why can't she just be Iris? Like,
That's the name of your eye. Like that's the thing in your eye. Like that's how it's called. It's
I
weird.
know.
Right. Question 5, James. Which installment did Leviathan first appear in?
It's going to be an early one, isn't it? I mean, don't give me. I'll say 2.
It's correct. It was 2. So that means we need to do the tiebreaker. So this is between Lauren and James. First person to say the answer as quick as you can. Are you ready?
Hopefully.
So what is the name of the Final Fantasy VII mobile game where the story was based around the Turks?
First Soldier.
Nope.
Oh wait, no! Before Crisis.
Correct.
Yeah,
Lauren is the winner.
I always know it's
Winner.
There you go.
I was just like, wait, hold on.
I was like, you guys have just wrote a book about all the games, right? So, that's helpful.
This proves that I actually
exactly.
listened.
It's worthwhile.
All those times where Darryl's just like, "You're not listening, Lauren." I actually got some semblance of knowledge.
We've settled some disputes.
It's just it works through osmosis.
Nice.
But no, I mean honestly, that is because I've had to sift through so much Before Crisis content. I really like want them to do like a proper version of it because of the fact
I've
that
tried
like,
to find it.
That's
so
when
much
I'll get
story.
into it.
Theoretically, it's going to be covered in Ever Crisis.
Yeah, that's what I'm kind of waiting for before I dip in.
I am
all
looking
those. I
forward
had
to
little
that.
dips in them when I was a kid, but I didn't have all the prerequisite PSPs and stuff to play them all. So I'm just gonna wait for the Ever Crisis and just play them all and see how
I
it goes.
know. I actually am really stoked for Ever Crisis. I
Yeah.
just hope they do it well. I really do.
It's gonna be.
Jury's out.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see with we'll see sooner rather than later. To be fair, hopefully. although it keeps getting delayed. Anyway,
Yeah.
Lauren, Darryl, thank you so much for coming and talking to us for a few hours. It's been really, really nice to speak to you.
Lovely.
Please tell us where we can find you in all of its various forms. Anything you want to plug, please just go for it.
I mean, if you just type in Final Fantasy Union wherever, we'll come up.
Yeah.
So depending on what type of content you like, we've got something for you.
Yeah, and then on Twitter and stuff, we're just at FF Union on most things. TikTok, Instagram. Actually, Instagram, I think we are Final Fantasy Union.
Yeah, it's a combination of Final Fantasy Union or FF Union. One of the two. Sometimes that gets confused with the Firefighters Union. But, you know...
and then Darryl sometimes posts on his own personal Twitter.
Never do.
No.
Never do.
But I'm
at
I'm at Level Up Lauren on everything. So just search Level Up Lauren and you'll find me.
And your She Plays Games podcast.
Yes, and She Plays Games podcast is just at She Plays Podcast, or you just search She Plays Games podcast in Google and you'll find me.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And with us, as usual, you can find us on Twitch at Final Fantasy and Chill, or Instagram Final Fantasy and Chill, and YouTube Final Fantasy and Chill. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you.
No worries. Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much for having us.